So a symptom can be bothersome, but that doesn't necessarily make it dangerous. Welcome to another edition of You and Me and Multiple Sclerosis. My name is Pam, and I've been living with multiple sclerosis for nearly 38 years. And this is my 101st episode. So this is kind of a milestone. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to any comments that you have on this topic, something that I've dealt with off and on for a long time now, and that is numbness. My fingers and my toes at the moment are all quite numb. I had a doctor do that little tuning fork thing to each one of them, and it turned out I couldn't feel the tuning fork. I can certainly feel feeling. It's not like I can't feel anything, but a lot of the fine sensations just don't seem to be there. The backs of my hands, the backs of my feet, the palms of my hands, the undersides of my feet, those are all fine. It's just the fingers and the toes, which of course means that I'm a lot clumsier than I even normally am. I have to be really, really careful because I might just drop things all the time, and that can be kind of bad. We've decided that Corelle is in my future because I think our good plates are not going to survive me trying to wash dishes. I'm thinking maybe I should look at a line of glassware that's shatterproof as well. I've had a few catastrophes over the last 6 months or so, I will say. But numbness in my life takes two forms. It's the one I've been talking about, the klutziness, and the not having the fine feeling in my fingers, and I assume my toes, although I'm not really sure I ever had fine feeling in my toes or would have noticed it if I had, so never mind that. But the lack of fine feeling does cause me not to be able to button buttons or thread needles or do anything that requires that level of sensation in your fingers. And so a number of hobbies that I might have wanted to take on or take up again, I just decided, never mind. Crocheting, I'm just not going to be able to do that. Sewing, nah, not easy anymore. So I think I'm just going to put some of that aside and give myself some grace, because you can't do everything. I'm just going to have to limit to what I can do. One of the things that my hand problems have resulted in is really, really poor writing. I cannot even read my own handwriting, and that's pretty sad. I have relied on my short-term memory a lot more, because if I take notes in a meeting, and as the church board secretary, that's a major job for me, I have to get that typed up pretty quickly afterwards. Otherwise, my short-term memory can't be expected to retain everything. So far, so good, but I really do wish that I could get a little bit more writing skill back. I've tried different pens and different inks and different positions, but there's only so much you can do. And since the board meetings tend to be at night, and that is my least favorite time as far as energy level, I think that does cause some problems for me. But oh well, I'm going to manage that. The thing that's actually more troublesome to me than the actual numbness is a kind of fatigue that I've talked about before. It's nerve fiber fatigue, and I think all of you can relate to that. It's that you can start out with your arms, your legs, whatever, working just fine, but if you overuse them, take a long walk or do a lot of writing, you all of a sudden hit a wall, and the nerve fibers just say, no, I'm done. I've had enough. I'm drained, and I'm not doing it anymore. And I run into that quite a lot with writing and even typing. When I was taking my graduate school classes here a year or so ago, I had to be on the computer for many hours during the day. And by the end of, say, 4 or 5 hours of being on the keyboard, especially if I had a paper I was typing, I would just run out of nerve fiber juice, whatever you want to call it. It was like all of my fingers had turned into sausages. They didn't want to touch the keys. I had a terrible time. And that is a lot more bothersome to me than just the numbness. I've learned to live with that pretty well. I have to be careful not to shut my finger in the drawer, but other than that, I haven't had too much trouble with numbness. I can live with klutziness. I think I just have to, as I said, invest in shatterproof dishware. But it's this nerve fiber fatigue that's driving me crazy because I don't know what to do about that. I found a number of articles, but I'm just going to focus on this one from Very Well Health. So let's go ahead. I'll pull that up and we can take a look together. So this is the article that I wanted to look at with you. It's from Very Well Health and it's Numbness and Tingling in Multiple Sclerosis. A lot of this information is pretty basic and it might not be very new to you, but just in case, it's always worth looking at. And of course, as they say, numbness and tingling are two of the most common symptoms of MS, and they were likely some of your first symptoms. May have been what led to your diagnosis. In my case, no. Actually, numbness has come on later on in life. I can't say it's been recent, but it's certainly not been the first symptom that I had. But this sentence, I think, here is important to keep in mind. While numbness and tingling can be frightening, they're usually not as disabling as motor symptoms, and it may also help to know that these symptoms don't necessarily mean that your MS is progressing. They can happen whether or not you're having a relapse, and I thought that was very comforting to see. You know, when you're in secondary progressive, it's kind of like the no man's land. I don't know what the course is going to be, but it's nice to know that even though my numbness in my fingers and toes seems to have increased recently, that does not mean my MS in general is progressing. And I would hope that this brings some comfort and encouragement to others of you who may be dealing with this as well. Then they have a nice summary graphic. They're going to go into more detail about each of these later. But these are the ways that you could cope with numbness and tingling in multiple sclerosis. And they talk about relaxation, they talk about exercise, the importance of avoiding triggers, balancing your body temperature, and finally the importance of being cautious. So let's go ahead and look quickly at some of these. But first, we do need to just make sure that we're all clear on what they're talking about, because there's a number of different sensations or lack of sensations that are related from a nervous system point of view. The one where things feel like they've fallen asleep, that's just numbness, like I've been trying to describe. There's no pain associated with it. There's no tingling or throbbing or anything else. But no matter whether there's pain or not, in general, they're called paresthesias. Here are some other descriptors for the kinds of sensations that you yourself might be experiencing also. Pins and needles, burning, tickling, itching, prickling. The affected area is feeling cold. Well, I guess I would have to say that's true for me, but I don't know if it's because of that or because my circulatory system doesn't work either. And then difficulty using the affected area, I guess, i.e. clumsiness, buzzing, vibrating, or throbbing. So any of those can be considered a paresthesia. And while those are not life-threatening, it's always good to keep track of them so you can tell your MS doctor the next time you have an appointment. And so they say here that sensory symptoms can be transient, which means that they only last for a little while, or they can last for a long time. And in addition, while some sensory symptoms cause only mild discomfort or are simply annoying, as in the case of paresthesias, others may be quite painful. And I am very, very grateful that mine does not involve pain. I've had some other ones that did involve pain, and I kind of don't like pain. So I guess this is MS giving me my Christmas present, that I'm going to have numbness without pain. But even given all of that, they say that if your numbness and tingling are new, severe, and or long-lasting, this may be a sign of an MS relapse, so you should see your healthcare provider to get a better diagnosis. And then there's a section here on location and effects, and I'm only going to go over the first two because they talk about the symptom that I've been having, and I just wanted to share what I've learned here. Numbness and tingling in MS can occur anywhere, but if your feet are affected, you may experience problems walking because you feel pain when you put pressure on your feet. Thankfully not. Your coordination and balance are impaired, definitely so. And your proprioception, the ability to sense where you are, is off. I've been dealing with proprioception problems for many years. I suppose a lot of it does have to do with lack of fine sensations in my feet. And then finally, when your hands are affected, you may experience problems with writing, yes, fine motor movements, yes, or holding things. Sort of yes, depends on what the things are. I'm not really good at holding small things like buttons or coins, but I'm a little better with larger things, at least so far. Not having enough hand strength to do some of the stuff I want to do, that's a whole different story, I think. They don't really cover that here, but I know that I have to be a little careful with that too. My left hand is definitely not as strong and reliable as my right hand at this point, so carrying hot beverages and whatnot, I have to be particularly mindful of that. They do have a downloadable PDF, questions that you can just use to discuss your symptoms with your healthcare provider. And I did take a look at this. It is actually quite useful, and I would recommend that you just go through it. Maybe it'll give you some ideas of things to talk about with your doctor the next time you see him or her. And of course, the causes of numbness and tingling are the same old ones that everything with MS can be caused by: lesions in your brain and or spinal cord, demyelination of nerve fibers. Well, same old story. And in a way, maybe the familiarity is a good thing. I kind of didn't want to have a whole new mechanism to figure out because I barely understand demyelination. And then this is interesting. It says often these sensory disturbances occur as part of a pseudo-exacerbation, which is a temporary increase in symptoms caused by an external factor. And we're going to talk more about these here in a minute. It's a difference between an actual exacerbation and something that, once the external factor is eliminated, might just resolve on its own. Then here are some ideas about how you can treat this stuff. It's no medications to treat numbness and tingling specifically. Options that you can try include the following: complementary and alternative medicine, and they talk about reflexology, acupuncture, biofeedback, and then they say a new diet, but I did click on this link in here that talks about the best bet diet, and it says that it's not recommended by the MS Society. They don't particularly think it's helpful, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. And then supplements, low levels of vitamin B12 they're more common in people with MS, and we sort of knew that. And they're also particularly common in those who don't eat a lot of meat, which would include me. I do supplement with vitamin B12 every day because I'm aware that my levels might be pretty low, just as a general way of living. And then they spend a little time talking about medications, but there's nothing that's really to be recommended. They mention several: gabapentin, which I was on for a while for some other reasons, and then this one here, Elavil, and then Cymbalta. And I don't know that they're worth trying if you haven't been on them already or using them for other things, because it doesn't sound like those are particularly helpful. At least there's not a lot of data to support that. And then they do, of course, remind you that there are side effects to any drug, and if numbness and tingling is truly your only symptom, maybe you should just leave it alone. But if it's unbearable, then it might be worth trying a medicine to see if you can get any relief from that. The second part is important. It says if your symptom is new, much worse than before, or has lasted more than 24 hours, this may signal a relapse. In this case, your healthcare provider will probably put you on a course of Solumedrol after confirming a relapse with an MRI. Now, I've never been on Solumedrol to my knowledge. I didn't know that that was such an automatic thing. Maybe you can tell me. Have you ever used Solumedrol? And what was the specific symptom for which you were being treated? And then there's some coping techniques that they suggest, which I think are, in the case of numbness and tingling, for the most part, that's probably a better route to try. So remember the graphic from earlier. These actually just go into detail about the things on the graphic. First of all, you need to relax and, ho, ho, ho. This isn't always as easy as they say in these neat little articles. Oh yeah, it would be great not to have stress going on in your life or things changing around you, but number one, life has change and change can be stressful. And number two, people with multiple sclerosis seem to have a harder time dealing with any kind of change or stress anyway. So we're kind of on a double whammy here. And I mentioned to you in my last video that I just recently acquired a new family member, a 60-pound German Shepherd named Sunny, who is a total delight, a wonderful, wonderful dog. But, she's a dog, and she's definitely changed a lot of things about the way we live. And that can be kind of stressful for someone like me. But they want you to try and take a break from your stress and relaxing. Well, you know what? I think I found a little bit of way to help. Today, as a matter of fact, is the first day that Sunny is going to spend the day with the people who are doing her training. They run a German Shepherd rescue, and they board a lot of dogs, a doggy daycare that will take our dog for the entire day. So now we have our Wednesdays, and probably it'll end up being another day in the week too, where we can get a lot of things done and not have to worry about the dog not wanting to be left alone by herself. She's actually not the kind of dog you can take just any old where, so it's a good thing that we will have a little bit of a break. And also she'll be getting some training too. She'll be learning some commands, and that'll make her a little bit easier to manage. And then they recommend meditation as a possibility, even if all you do is close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and pay attention to your breath. I think that does help to relax. And just as a little freebie tip I'm going to throw in here, that's also a great way to get your blood pressure to register as lower when you go to the doctor. You don't necessarily even have to close your eyes, but what I find is slow down my breathing and breathe in deeply, and my blood pressure does go down a little bit. So if you're worried about having your blood pressure a little high at the doctor's office, that's my recommendation of how you might be able to avoid that. And then the other one is to do something that you love for at least a couple of minutes. Well, I don't know. Longer than that would be nice. Longer than a couple of minutes. But listening to a podcast or your favorite song, yeah, music for me is definitely something that helps me with my mood. Or reading, or have a cup of tea, take a walk. Whatever kind of self-care that you get benefit from, that's a good idea if you're finding that you need to relax. And then, of course, numbness and tingling could be exacerbated because you're either too hot or too cold. And so what you might want to do is make sure that you control your environmental conditions as much as possible. Another piece of advice they give is to avoid triggers. So avoid what triggers your symptoms. Try to avoid them in the future as well. So instead of getting overheated from exercise, if that makes your numbness worse, Try walking in an air-conditioned gym instead of outdoors, or consider a cooling vest. And those are just ideas. You may have your own strategies that you've used to avoid triggering your numbness or your tingling. And again, I would love to hear in the comments what you do. And again, exercise. So, have you ever seen a doctor's article on exercise that didn't tell you it was beneficial for whatever we're talking about? So, of course, they're not going to tell you that exercise is going to harm you. But I don't think it will. It's just, again, you do need to think of your own condition and regulate yourself. Make sure that you're not doing something that will only make things worse. As here they say, exercise can have a positive impact on common MS symptoms, and they specifically name paresthesia. I think it can also make it worse. It sort of depends. I'm not really good at aerobic exercise. It makes me feel downright ill. I can do it for a little, but I can't work up a sweat or be out of breath or anything like that. I'll just feel really dreadful. So I've learned to do my exercise in short bursts. I think it still helps. But I also think you get a lot of benefit from just moving, no matter what that looks like. And this is another interesting point that they make, that paresthesia symptoms may have indirectly improved due to decreased symptoms of depression rather than from the exercise itself, because exercise does help with depression. And if you are depressed, a number of your symptoms may be exacerbated. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then, of course, be cautious. If you have numbness in a certain part of your body, be extra careful that you don't end up injuring that part of your body. And they give the example of facial numbness. You need to be careful when you're eating. I assume maybe when you're shaving, if you're a man. There are increased risks of doing damage to yourself if you have numbness and you can't really feel the warning sign that, uh-oh, I'm about ready to hurt myself. I've had that happen. As I said, sometimes if I'm not paying attention, I've shut my hands in drawers and stuff. Not that that has caused me great injury, but I don't think that I would have done that if I'd had the early warning signals that I used to have with the fine sensations that most of us have. As they say, if you're feeling paresthesias in your hands or feet, be careful not to engage in any activity in which you might lose your grip or fall down and injure yourself. If possible, try to relax until the sensations pass. And I suppose that's good advice, but it's sort of common sense in a way, right? Yeah, relaxing is always a good idea. This final word is interesting too. It's important to tell your healthcare provider if your paresthesias are painful or bothersome to the point where they're affecting your functioning or the quality of life. And then they say, be reassured too that while your numbness and tingling may be uncomfortable or distracting, they're not as worrisome to healthcare providers as, for example, loss of vision, falling, or balance problems. Let your healthcare provider know if these symptoms become severe, last a long time, or are accompanied by other symptoms. And that's good advice just in general, no matter what symptom you might be dealing with. Now, I wanted to just quickly scroll down here to the related articles, because there's one here that's, can numbness and tingling be a symptom of rheumatoid arthritis? And I won't click on this article, but I'll let you know that I did look at it. And the answer to that question is yes, it is possible that numbness and tingling can be symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis. That's also an inflammatory disease. It's very severe. It can be life-threatening. I had a friend who passed away from complications of rheumatoid arthritis. When I started to have some problems with a finger that was giving me fits, I did have a rheumatologist check me for rheumatoid arthritis. He did a blood test, which is the standard way to tell, and he assured me that I did not have rheumatoid arthritis. However, he told me I have what is known as generalized osteoarthritis, and I assume that has nothing to do with MS. That's just a sort of a bonus ailment that I have. But so far, I haven't really found that the generalized osteoarthritis is causing me any real problems. But you might want to make sure if you have tingling or numbness that you get checked for rheumatoid arthritis. It's better to know about it sooner than later. Well, I hope that was helpful. For me, it was really good to know that just because my numbness seems to be getting a little bit worse does not necessarily mean I'm in some kind of progression. And I hope that that is good news for you as well. Wherever you are with your MS symptoms, they aren't always as dire as we might think. We become very sensitive to our bodies and the changes that we're going through. And sometimes we worry, perhaps, that something different means something really bad. So just make sure to tell your doctor about it, expecting that it's probably not going to end up being a big deal. There's no need for us to get down, especially this time of year. Between the holiday stresses and the shorter, gloomier days, there's so many reasons to get overstressed or just kind of down. I'm making sure this time that I have plenty of other things to occupy my mind so that I don't go down that path. I might be something of a hypochondriac when it comes to these MS symptoms. I always have to look into them because I never want to take anything at face value, and there might be some advice out there that's worth knowing. And that means that I also would like to hear from you. If you have any suggestions about how to deal with numbness or any other MS symptom, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing what you know. I'll see you again in my next video.